The second thing I want to say, which is usually the first thing I would say, is I just want to recognize and acknowledge all of you here today. Every participant here is involved with a very vulnerable population that needs many of trusted adults that could reconnect some of the developmental arrests that happen due to trauma, which we'll talk about today. And it takes trusted adults who are a safe space for these youth and children to just change the trajectory of their future. So I commend all of you for what you do in your respective roles. Now, may I get a thumbs up that you can see the slides? Yes? Okay. So today, the mindset I would love for you to have or be in is I want you to think about your youth and or children, foster or your actual children, okay? And maybe yourself as a child when we are going through the presentation together. And I want you to reflect on times when you believed there was a character defect in yourself or the foster youth or a child, a student, your own child. And the mindset I want you to be in is to compare and contrast what could be a trauma symptom and what could actually be a character trait or a character flaw that we need to address as parents or practitioners, clinicians, educators, or a trauma symptom that we need to treat. Okay. So I'll give you a more in-depth but still brief biography about myself. I am a trauma therapist. I see clients ages 14 and up. And, trauma comes in many shapes and forms and sizes, complex and not. And it's a fascinating field to be in. And it's a highly rewarding type of job to be in, because when you uplift someone out of the ruins of trauma that they've been under, that they may be aware of or not aware of, it's life changing, and it's such an honor and a privilege to be someone who's able to facilitate that for somebody. I am a licensed professional counselor with a limited license that will be a full license in about a month and a half, which is great. I'm also a nationally certified counselor. I have trained and have been certified in the flash technique for trauma practitioners, which is a technique that processes distressful memories of trauma. And currently, I'm undergoing training and certification in EMDR therapy, which is eye movement desensitization and reprocessing therapy, as well as getting certified as a clinical mental health and nutrition clinical specialist. So that's my, what you would say, like private practice, clinical side of my therapy. Now, I'm also an educator and have been for a few years as a school counselor. But my official job title now is overseeing the school counselors in my district. So I'm the coordinator of school academic counseling. And I'm a member of the Michigan School Counselor Association. And Khadija was too generous with calling my co-authorship a book. It's a research study, which is still very important, and it's a point of pride for me, but it's not a book. It's a research study. I am a self-proclaimed nerd consumer of education and information and knowledge. So I'm still going on with my research route, and an area that is very dear to my heart and brain is refugee mental health. So I'm still progressing with that. And as Khadija mentioned, I am a very proud wife, a mother of two. And if that was more applicable to what we're doing today, that would be my number one. That's my first point of pride. And I got into this amazing field or dual field in schools and out in the therapy world, really to address youth mental health, because I do believe it's often misunderstood and judged and even rejected by parents or any adults or youth toward each other. So that they're a very vulnerable group to think about without any explicit trauma, right? We add on being a refugee with all the different trauma levels or stages that refugees go through, starting at the initial stage, which we covered last time we met in November, of the actual events that took place for that child or youth member to be a refugee. So war, persecution, uh, just an unsafe situation to begin with, and that's already a trauma layer. And then most refugees don't just go to their final host country right away. They have a few stops or at least one stop in between, and that's another trauma layer, right? And a lot of these in between countries, not a lot, but well, maybe a lot actually. A lot of them are not the most hospitable and the most welcoming to refugees. And there's a lot of rejection that happens during that time. So there's that added layer of trauma, and then we finally get to their host country, which is hopeful, right? Like in the U.S., it's hopeful we're going to settle and start a new life, and there's a lot of support and help. But there's also the trauma of acculturation and understanding a new culture, a new educational system, a new mode of life, a new language, and that can be a lot of pressure and chronic stress, which can be equivalent to more trauma that needs to be processed. So now that we're in this mindset of, you know, we're not, we're going to try not to judge an individual, one of our foster children, um, or conceptualize their behavior as a character flaw or defect. We're really going to put on the trauma filter, like eyeglasses, and ask ourselves, is this a trauma symptom, or is this something in their personality genetically, or something that was nurtured by the environment that led them to be this type of person? And there's a huge difference when you put on the trauma filter, the trauma eyeglasses. So I chose, for the sake of this workshop, to go deeper, not just into like the PTSD realm, but the complex PTSD. And there are nuances and differences between the two. So complex PTSD is recurring or sort of like long-term trauma or compiled trauma, and it has more symptoms and more criteria than PTSD, which PTSD can just be like a one event or maybe two events that traumatize the individual. So, how does trauma show up in complex PTSD? One can be an emotional flashback, and an emotional flashback is really what we call triggers, right? So an emotional flashback happens and the individual that's going through it is not aware that it's happening. They're just reacting to the intense emotion and feeling that they're feeling. And the person who they're dealing with also most of the time does not know that they're experiencing an emotional flashback. So, what does that look like in real life? When you think of a time when you were dealing with your foster youth and you felt like they were overreacting. So, if we're dealing with individuals whom we know have had traumatic experiences in their lives, we want to delete the word overreaction from our vernacular, from our vocabulary, because it's dismissive of the fact that they are most likely experiencing an emotional flashback. Emotional flashbacks are intense. They're relatively intense. They're more intense than what the moment or the event in the moment is calling for. And that's why they seem like an overreaction. And it's because a feeling that you have caused or someone has caused triggered this emotional flashback of something maybe horrific, maybe so unpleasant, devastating, and the youth is just reacting in the same way they would have in that original memory. Okay. But there is no connection because emotional memories or traumatic memories get stored in the emotional part of our brain, the limbic system. Okay. And if we, I'll show you if, can, Khadija, can everybody see me as well?
Yes, they should be able to. It depends on the view that they have.
Okay. If you guys can just direct your attention to me, if you can see me, and I would like to model. It's called the hand model of the brain. It's very simplistic, but I think it's very helpful, and I use it with my clients a lot. If we can imagine that this is our brain, our hand is our brain, and the thumb is the limbic system, which is responsible for our emotions, okay, or our emotional reactions. And the rest of the fingers, these four fingers, are our prefrontal cortex or our new cortex that's responsible for reasoning and executive function, decision making, all the rational stuff. Okay, and this is the brainstem right here, your wrist, which is responsible for the automatic stuff, breathing, digesting, the stuff we don't think about that our body just takes care of when we go through an experience, and this is our brain, okay, an experience, maybe Khadija said something to me and I was like, that made me feel some type of way, like I don't feel good about it. Sorry, Khadija, I'm just using you as an example.
No problem.
Okay, thank you. It made me feel like a little bit offended or slighted, right? um it's not a traumatic experience, it's just it activated my thumb right here, my limbic system. Because it's not a traumatic experience, my brain is solid. Everything is communicating. So you see the fingers are touching my thumb. My rational part of the brain is talking to my emotional part. So it can say maybe Khadija was in a bad mood. Maybe I said something that offended her, and that was maybe I was wrong, and I like elicited that comment. Uh, so your reason and your emotions start communicating, and you make sense out of it, and then that creates a decision. Let me go talk to Khadija and be like, you know what, this upset me. Like, let's resolve this. Or I'm going to let it go because I know she's been stressed out about the workshop today. Okay. When a traumatic experience happens, what happens is we literally, if you can imagine, blow off our lid, our brain lid. Okay. So the reason is further away from our emotion right here, and there is no communication. And the traumatic memory gets stored right here. It never processes completely. It never, there is no dialogue between the limbic and the prefrontal cortex to make sense about of what happened, because we blew off our lid and we went into fight, flight, freeze mode, right? We activated our sympathetic nervous system, which I'll get into in a little bit. You see it on the screen right now. And that's how emotional flashbacks happen. It's an activation of this part that never resolved with this part. So the if you imagine the youth just reacting, and it makes sense to them because it never connected here, right? When we respond to them in that state with their hyper arousal, with their body getting heated, and the intensity of that flashback, and we're coming down hard on them, or we're enforcing a consequence, we're being dismissive of the fact that they just experienced a very intense, strong trauma symptom. And I also want you to keep this in mind as you're listening. We want to be careful that our response to our youth is not further rejection that they've already kind of have cemented in them. Okay, so um, I hope I summed this up for you guys in a cohesive way, and forgive me if I haven't. I'm trying my best with the sickness. Okay, and if you have any questions, please drop them in the chat, and I promise you we'll get to all of them. The next part I want you to be aware of that can manifest in different behaviors is what's called toxic shame, that trauma can embed in internally inside of our youth, and it can be these internalized messages like, I went through so much because I'm not a good person, or um, I I'm here without my parents because I don't deserve love. These intro As children, the trauma and the lack of processing, because the lid is blown and there is no communication between the two parts of the brain, opens up this door for these internalized negative cognitions to flourish, right? This is happening to me because I don't deserve much. I'm worthless. I'm helpless. And this inner critic inside of each one of the traumatized individuals or youth, children, affects their self esteem, affects what they believe they deserve, and it kind of intrinsically makes them feel like they don't deserve much. So their help seeking behavior is non-existent, right? That can manifest itself as rejection to you. So if you feel rejected by your foster youth, think about, is there a shame message in there in the youth that is getting kind of like cross-wired here, you know? um, Maybe let me try a different approach. Let me address the fact that they deserve my help and I'm here, not to force your help or them accepting you, but you just stay consistent with the fact that you are here and they are deserving, and when they need you, they can find you this way. Okay, instead of us prolonging that shame mentality of like, I don't deserve anything, so they're rejecting you, and then maybe you reject them, and we're kind of solidifying that shame message. Okay. And now, I think we're all familiar with the four F's: fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. Um, and we'll go. Uh oh, I skipped way ahead, guys. I'm sorry. We're going to take a deeper look at them. I think the most known ones are fight or flight. Fight is, any type of like heightened behavior that might be protective or seemingly aggressive. It can be physically moving, or fighting. It can be flailing. It can be raising the voice. It can be just kind of like bucking up the body to, like we're going into defense mode. Flight is any form of avoidance. Freeze is what it indicates. It's freezing. It's when people panic and they freeze. And over time, that in trauma survivors, that can be a way of life, and we'll get into it right now. Fawn is when, through our trauma and life experiences, we learned that in order for me to get something, I have to fawn and I have to, appeal uh, to authority, or I have to it can like border on manipulative behavior too, and that's what it can look like. But it's, if again, we can be irritated by it if we think of it as manipulative behavior, but if we think of it as a trauma symptom, we're going to have a lot more empathy for it, right? And we can treat it and get rid of it. So if we look at this polyvagal theory, and that's the polyvagal, it's, we're looking at like a different manifestations and modes of our nervous system, right? If we look at the green part, that's when we feel safe. That's your rest and digest. We can, social engagement doesn't mean that we are like an introvert, or someone who is on the autistic spectrum is going to be more social, right? It's, social engagement is you're as social as you can be, okay? So I don't want you guys to think like if somebody's not being social, that they're not necessarily in this green area of like the parasympathetic system. It can just be their personality, actually, and, or the way their brain works. But when we're in the social engagement, in that safety mindset, our nervous system is relaxed. We can eat, we can rest, we can breathe. Our heart rate is regulated. Our breathing is normal. And most of us, or all of us, should mostly be in the parasympathetic mode most of the time, right? And that's where we thrive. Now, you see that area that says alert? It's between green and yellow. That is when we like on alert that something is changing, something is up. Maybe it's not danger, but maybe it's just a deadline. Maybe me, May, I'm in the alert zone right now as I'm doing this workshop, just to kind of like up my production, and to make sure that I do a good job for all of you guys participating. Okay, and then we get to so the alert mode is like your nervous system is on alert, ready to switch to that yellow sympathetic fight or flight. Okay, that's when our heartbeat increases, our blood pressure goes up, digestion stops, or takes a back seat, and it's the hormones and the necessary chemicals are in full production to protect yourself because there is a perceived danger. Okay, now fight or flight is mostly what's going to happen to our youth in the our foster youth in the initial phases of their trauma. Okay, and people who experience fight or flight, if you see that in them, there's still kind of like what we say, like they still have some fight in them to live, right? What is very concerning is when our foster youth get to that yellow part of freeze, that frozen response. Like they have fought, they have avoided, they have fawned, they have tried it all, and now they're just frozen. There is a shutdown. There is a sense of like giving up. Um, and physically, the body is kind of like in this survival mode, but not in the way that it's fighting. It's kind of like maintaining the little life it can hold on to. Okay, and that's when you just feel that there's no motivation. Um, there's no moving forward, and sometimes self harm and suicidal ideation. Okay, and I want you guys. We want to destigmatize suicidal ideation, and we want to normalize talking about it because it's very common for teenagers and unfortunately now children to have some type of suicidal ideation. And we don't need to freak out and think of like hospitalization and calling 981, which is the mental health care the mental emergency line, the mental health emergency line, or 911. We want to make it normal to talk about it because they do, people with suicidal ideation, especially youth, they don't want to have it anymore. They want you actually to relate to them, to talk them through it. Okay? So I invite all of you, if you are suspecting any suicidal ideation or self harm tendencies, to straight up ask your foster youth, are you thinking of hurting yourself? Are you thinking of doing anything to yourself? Tell me about it. Okay, let's figure out what we need to do so that you can feel better. Okay. And obviously, if there is ideation, you'd want to get connected with a mental health provider just to properly assess the risk of that ideation. So, we're going to go through a few somatic manifestations of trauma, which is the physical symptoms of trauma, okay, that we may confuse with other things going on. Um, so, shallow and complete and incomplete breathing, constant adrenalization, which means that they're because their nervous system was activated for so long in the sympathetic mode, now their adrenaline production is dysregulated, right? Now we're producing adrenaline um, anytime we perceive a threat, and that perception may oftentimes be just like emotional flashbacks or an actual flashback or something that reminds you of the trauma. But again, that network, that connection is not clear in their mind. So they're just constantly on adrenaline and then crashing, on adrenaline and then crashing. And that on the body, that activation of the sympathetic nervous system takes a toll. And that's why children and youth members, youth individuals who have a lot of adverse childhood events that they have gone through tend to not have the best physical health in their 30s, 40s, and beyond. Okay? Because their bodies have just went through a lot of wear and tear from this adrenalization and from armoring, which is chronic muscle tightness, which comes up when we want to suppress a feeling. Okay. So when they were going through their trauma and it was too dangerous or unsafe to feel and express the feeling, we tightened our muscles to kind of suppress it. And that becomes just a regular behavior that, or a mechanism that is used throughout life. And again, it takes a toll physically on the body. Another thing is just an inability to be present and grounded in their physical body in the moment. They're just never or rarely in the moment and living. They're on autopilot, if you want to conceptualize it that way. Having sleeping problems from being overactivated, and the overactivation comes from the dysregulation of their nervous system due to the layers of the trauma that they've had. So just imagine this, you know, you have your foster son or foster daughter, and they're having sleep issues, and then we go straight to like, oh, they're playing games or getting too much screen time or staying up talking to friends, but we're dismissing that there is this underlying foundation of overactivation of the nervous system that we need to attend to before putting on all these auxiliary reasons that are not actually the root cause of the sleep problem. And then you may have digestive disorders, maybe not even full blown disorders in your youth, but digestive issues. And I just invite you and encourage you to address their stress levels and how grounded they are and their relaxation in an attempt to attend to their digestive issues if they're present, rather than just, we're going to go to a doctor, they're going to put you on this medication, and then we might be experimenting with different types of medicines for the rest of their lives because we're not addressing the root cause of this is a result of like a constant interruption to the digestive process naturally in our body because of the overactivation of our nervous system. I'm opening the chat. Okay. Would you guys like me to take any questions now? Or
I haven't seen any. If
okay.
anybody wants to come on off of mute, and ask a question, that would be fine. Oh, there is a comment from Becky. Becky, thank you for sharing. Were you able to read it? Okay,
Yes, yes.
want to address.
No, Becky, I'm in no way saying that you shouldn't take the individual to the doctor. Of course, but I'm saying, and I see it in like several of my clients who they're not even aware of their own trauma to advocate for themselves with their physicians. So they are on a constant like trial and error base for on medications. And if they and once we kind of get to the core of their trauma treatment, and it goes hand to hand, and there's collaboration between their therapist and their physician, and there is this like continuity of care, things get better. I was just the point of this presentation is to absolutely, absolutely, I'm not saying that medications are not helpful. I'm just saying there are many people on cycles of medication, and they're not medications just remove symptoms, but they don't address the root cause sometimes. And it's important, especially if we know that we have foster youth who have gone through trauma, to make sure that we attend to the trauma itself and its symptoms that may masquerade as something else. Yeah, that's what I meant. I am, you know, I'm all for Western medicine and homeopathic medicine. Anything that can help someone, I'm all for it. Okay.
Thank you, May. And then I think there was just one clarification. The mental health emergency number is it's 988, right?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. So thank you, Kim,
Did
for
I
pointing that out.
did I say something different? Okay. My apologies, guys, if I said something different. Okay. All right. So now we're going to move on some developmental arrests or developmental goals that each individual conquers by a certain phase in their childhood and adolescence, and trauma causes an arrest to that. Kind of like the movie, if you want to think of like Arrested Development, something happened that caused an interruption, and that interruption then has some consequences after, throughout their adulthood. Okay, so trauma may have an impact on self acceptance and identity development. It very well may have an impact on the capacity for self compassion and feeling like you deserve love and support, like we've discussed earlier. It might heighten your sense of self protection, feeling alone and unsafe. So you're hyper vigilant and maybe defensive, and that causes an inability to relax, and um, a disruption to knowing and developing skill of taking care of yourself and developing the self-esteem to do so, or recognizing that you deserve that, and also just simply believing that life is a gift, and you can thrive, and like manifesting and growing that willpower and motivation and confidence to actually keep going, and increase that resilience. And then another interesting way that trauma may impact memory. So we saw the brain model, and we saw the brain hand model, and how emotional memories get stored in a way where they don't fully get processed, and that uh, like raises or has a lot of consequences that ensue as a result. Trauma can also impact the four types of memory. The semantic memory, and the example you see right here is, this is what a bike. I see this image, I see it out on the street, I know that this is a bike. So trauma can actually prevent information from various parts of the brain to kind of like gel together. Okay. And it can affect the semantic memory, and that can be uh, seen in maybe like elementary age children. And the reason why I think this is important for us to know is for you all as foster parents and individuals, professionals who deal with foster youth, to advocate for the children in their school and how they're studying and how they're learning and in their abilities, because the last thing we want is to facilitate any more rejection uh, that the children might feel. Okay, so just know that trauma can affect semantic memory in this way. Now, episodic memory is a bit similar to what I described in the emotional traumatic memories, where, an episodic memory is falling off the bike and remembering, I fell off the bike on Main Street. It was 2 o'clock, 2 p.m., and it was hot. So you remember elements of that story. But trauma, you can have the memory, but you don't remember all the elements of what happened, and it can also be a result of dissociating during that trauma, because it was just too much for the brain to handle, and it went into like protection mode, like I'm freezing and I'm not letting the full episode of this memory sink in. Emotional memories we did talk about, and that comes up as triggers. And trauma can affect procedural memory, and that's in um, how to do things. So how to ride a bike, or like certain things that we do that just become second nature, and we don't need to learn them again and again. Trauma can affect procedural memory. So exercising more patient with our uh, youth or children who have lived through some trauma would be very, very helpful for them. Okay, so here's a list of things or behaviors that we can see that may look like a character flaw or defect or something we need to parent. But I put next to them the put it doesn't I want you to look at that equal sign, not as like this equals this, but this may equal this. Okay, so any of our children with quote unquote anger issues, and I put quotes because the better term for anger issues that we should all use is emotional dysregulation, because anger issues is really a manifestation of an inability to regulate our emotions properly. So, and that can be for all children, but with our youth who've had trauma or children who've had trauma, it is an overactivation or a trigger to activate that fight response, because there is probably an emotional flashback to something that reminds them of their trauma, and they have to go in this defense mode, right? We can have some of our kids, especially teenagers, who look like they're apathetic, they don't have any motivation, they don't have goals, there is no thinking about the future. And if we view them that way and perceive them that way, we may actually teach them that they are a person whom they're not, because they will start to believe it, and they will, and if there was some hope, glimmer of hope, that they would actually uh, wake up and do something out of the freeze response, where we might be diminishing that. So we want to make sure that we assess, are they in a frozen state right now? Is it, do we need to do some trauma work to kind of like give them that activation and hope to like plan a future? Then we there can be social withdrawal in our youth, and that is a flight response. Flight response is always avoidance, right? It's a an avoidance or a flight response can be the social withdrawal. It can be addiction, drugs, or substances are avoidance mechanisms. Um, Surprisingly, also overachievement or being high functioning. It might not seem like an issue, right? But it could be an issue if it's a flight response. If you have a child or an adolescent who is constantly on the go, 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 achieving, 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 and you feel like this is tied also to their self worth, you want to think, what happens when we take that away? Will he or she collapse? Are they overachieving to avoid feeling their pain? Or uh, are they avoiding something, avoiding a grief process that they need to go through? So, on its surface, it doesn't seem like a problem, but if we go through life like that, it can manifest in many issues. So, and then I'll just go through these for the sake of time quickly. Refusing help um, can be related to a self esteem or self compassion arrest. Relationship issues, which includes like setting boundaries or not respecting boundaries, trust issues, intimacy issues, whether it's physical or emotional intimacy, that can be a self protection arrest due to trauma. Overthinking, if you have a child or a teenager who you feel or you perceive as an overthinker, they overthink things. It might be intrusive thoughts or actual flashbacks, and flashbacks can be for a few moments, and flashbacks can take weeks. You can be in a flashback for weeks on end. We talked about digestive and food relations, food relationship issues, and then sometimes manipulative behavior uh, is a can be a result of a self-protection, again, arrest. It's, I have to manipulate and I have to fawn and I have to like endear myself to get what I want, and it's a survival mechanism. So having gone through all that, what can we do? um, Holding space is such a therapeutic intervention that any of us can do at any time in any place. It's basically just being there for your foster child uh, and holding space for them to be or experience whatever they need to. And that's why therapy works. That's one of the main things, is because the therapist is holding space for the client, whereas in everyday life that space is not as available. You can hang out with a friend, you're holding space for them, and they're holding space for you at the same time, but it's kind of like reciprocal, right? But if we just want to hold space for our youth when they need it, in silence even, um, and not having this need to fix, it's very therapeutic. It's rapport and trust building. It invites them later to open up and process what they need to process with you. Normalizing what they're feeling and validating what they're feeling, whether you can relate to it or not. You know, you don't need to only validate what you understand. If they're feeling something, then it's valid for them. And offering that validation opens up the door for them to feel safe sharing more with you and viewing you as someone who can support them. Facilitating grief. A lot of negative feelings or disruptive behavior sometimes is the result of avoiding grief, right? And grief doesn't have to be because they lost someone or they lost something only. Grief can be losing part of themselves. Grief can be losing the future or the trajectory of life that they thought they were going to have. So allowing them to grieve that and validating that it's really hard actually facilitates the rebirth of that part of them in a new, maybe not new identity, but just a new future and a new outlook. So facilitating grief is really therapeutic, and we don't have to call it grief with them. It's just like if you want to be sad, you can be sad. If you want to be mad, you can be mad. And um, grief is usually a mix of the two, right? And that happens when you hold space for them. Also, that's how we can facilitate it. Helping them in navigating any distress that occurred in their identity. They maybe don't feel like they belong in the school. Maybe they don't feel like they belong in your home. Just investigate what makes them feel like they don't belong, and solidify uh, their values and your acceptance, and that you will support their identity formation in every way you can, and that you're just there to support and ensure their safety and their success in the new environment that they're in. Engage in relational healing. So, relational healing is also, we can think of it as co regulation. When you sit with them in their pain and you show them that you can be relaxed and soothing to them, it physically gets their body regulated, right? Their emotions. But if they're heightened and you respond to them with a heightened response, it's now we're co-dysregulating, right? So if you just kind of contain them and keep your regulation, your emotional regulation, and heal them through that relationship that you want to maintain with them, that is not just healing at the moment or distress, taking away the stress of the moment, but it's healing in terms of what the negative cognitions that resulted from their trauma are. Which takes us to the next point. I just talked about the physical regulation. If you have a triggered a foster child or foster client, let's work on addressing the physical symptoms of dysregulation first. So let's work on breathing. Let's sit down, maybe lay down, put our head down. Just let's get the body moving away from the sympathetic response to, okay, thank you, Shireen, to the parasympathetic, where we can just relax, and then we can talk things through. You can give your instructions. You can you can address certain behaviors. You can issue consequences if the need. But in the moment when it's heightened, let's regulate our physical body first. And then know your own triggers, your own biases. We all have biases. We all have judgments. To even if we try our best not to. And I think the best way to be there for others is to know our biases and keep ourselves in check, know our triggers and keep ourselves in check. Like, no, okay, I'm triggered right now. Let me regulate myself before I address my teen or my child. And be curious about them and what's going on with them and why they're feeling how they're feeling. I used a wonderful book by Pete Walker for some of the research for this presentation, and he had a section with parenting affirmations. And this is the last slide, and I want to leave you guys with this because I can bet you that your youth may have never heard these sentences or may have never felt the sentiment of these phrases right here. So I just want you to leave you with it. I want you to take one or two that you're comfortable saying and just use them with your youth. And even if you can't say them, maybe just embed them in your mindset when you're dealing with your own children and your foster children, and operate from that mindset. I think a lot of children would love to know, I am so glad you were born. I love who you are, and I'm doing my best to always be on your side. You don't have to be perfect to get my love and protection. All your feelings are okay with me. You can pick your own friends and you don't have to like everyone. You can have your own preferences and tastes. That's something for like the identity development that we're talking about. It's okay for you to be angry, and I won't let you hurt yourself or others when you are. You can make mistakes. They are your teachers. So they're loving, they're validating, and they paint you as a safe person if you genuinely say them and operate with their sentiment. And you know, the last one that everybody loves to hear is, I am very proud of you. People don't hear this enough. So I leave you guys with that. Thank you very much. And we'll take any questions.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, May. The post poll is the questions are on your screen. And if you have any questions and you want to come off of mute to ask, that would be fine. I know we're at the 12 o'clock mark and some people might have to go. But if you do have any questions, please feel free to come off of chat. And then May, I do have one question that we can address while we're waiting for someone to ask. But the question is, how can we help youth unlearn harmful labels they've internalized from adults or systems that misunderstood them?
Can you repeat the question? Let me see if I see it.
No, I don't,
Oh, okay.
yeah, that's a question that I got.
Sure. Can you repeat it, Khadija?
Yeah, sure. How can we help youth unlearn harmful labels that they've internalized from adults or systems that misunderstood them?
So it would be through modeling. Raising that flag every time they say it. So I'll tell you, like with my students and this is just a simple example. I have some students who say sorry about everything. Like if they breathe, they say sorry. If they, I don't know, anything they do, they say sorry. And to me, that is a signal that someone at some point taught them that they can just do no right. Okay. To take the power, we want to give sorry its power back, which is, I'm going to be sorry when I actually did something wrong. So it's a dialogue. It starts with what, if we'll just go with this example. What are you sorry about? What happened? Oh, blah, blah, blah. Well, there is nothing wrong with that. So it starts with a dialogue, and then it starts with you modeling what the other label should be and using it correctly in certain circumstances, right? For example, like let's say with that student, I do say, oops, I'm sorry. And then I go like, you know what? No, I'm not sorry. I didn't do anything wrong. That was an accident. So modeling what you want them to unlearn. The good thing about this question is you identified that they learned it from someone. Anything learned can be unlearned and substituted. Okay. So just keep modeling and reminding them of the correct label, and over time they will absorb that.
And thank you so much.
My pleasure.
We
My
might
pleasure.
have time for one more other question. I don't know if there's anything else in the chat I don't see. I think Barb has a comment here. Yes, we will definitely be sharing, Barb. And usually by the end of the day, we'll have it up on our YouTube channel, and then we'll share it via email with everybody. But thank you all. Thank you so much for joining us today for part two of our Refugee Youth Mental Health series, differentiating between symptoms and character behavior flaws. A special and heartfelt thank you to our presenter, May Sabah, for sharing such insightful, compassionate, and practical guidance with us. I think the way you humanized the challenges is truly impactful. And, as a parent and as, case managers and um, anyone who works with foster youth, we're so grateful for your time and your expertise. So thank you. And to all of our participants, thank you for showing up, engaging, and for the work that you're doing every day to support our youth. We hope that today's session and the workshop gave you some new tools, maybe shifted some perspective, and reminded you that healing always begins with understanding. So if you have any follow-up questions or would like to access any resources that May mentioned today, feel free to connect with us after the session. And stay tuned for future workshops as we continue building this important conversation together. And thank you, wishing you all a great rest of the day. And thank you all for being here. And please don't forget to complete that post poll. We really appreciate you. Thank you.